In 1997, he was the director and the vice president of Rotary, and thanks to Norm Wilson, who organised this club to nominate him, he became the head of Rotary in 1997, and he ran a very successful convention in Indianapolis. I can remember the difficulty he had in organising his theme for the year, which was Show Rotary Cares. It's more complex than people realise, working out a theme. You have to fit into all sorts of conventions, and then ultimately came up with that theme, which had four aspects to it. And so I think we should be very grateful that we've had a person of this quality as a member of our club, of our district, and the world of Rotary, and even the further world should be appreciative of what he's achieved over his years. I look forward to hearing what he has to say tonight. He told me that he's the last speaker, as Clem says, we don't really believe that.
President Travis, my fellow Rotarians and guests, can you hear me? Yes. Tonight I'm going to be talking about things that I've never talked about since I served as the President of Rotary. It's common in Australia that after 25 years the Cabinet minutes are made public. And tonight I'm going to make public some of the queer things that happened to me when I was the President-elect of Rotary. It is just more than 20 years ago that I arrived at the Rotary International Secretariat as the 1997-98 President nominee. Our arrival at the Secretariat was not a happy experience. We hadn't anticipated the unexpected. What could go wrong did. I soon found out that the President's office was a disorganised unit that lacked professionalism and discipline. You'll be surprised by the difficulties I encountered in the first 12 months. They are stories I am telling for the first time. When my nomination to serve as the President of Rotary was confirmed, I got an email from the manager of the President's office saying, "Glen, you must come to the Secretariat as soon as possible. We have a lot of work to do before 1997. I wrote back to this fellow and said, "I can't come, but I'll be there in January." When I got there in January, I went to the President's office and asked where the office of the President nominee was. There wasn't one. I was taken to the trustee chairman's office to work. I worked there for about a week, and the trustee chairman arrived, and I said to this fellow, "Where do I work now?" And he said, "You can work in the President's office." So I went to the President's office to work, and about 2 weeks later the President arrived. I said, "Where do I go now?" He said, "I'll get an office on the 14th floor for you, right down in the bowels of the organisation." That was a most unsatisfactory relocation. And I stayed there until the 1st of July 1996, when I became the President-elect. In the first week at the Secretariat, Heather and I were asked to meet with the General Secretary. It ran through my mind it would be a welcome to the Secretariat. I was wrong. I was informed before I met him that he was formerly a London police officer, before becoming manager of the Rotary International Britain and Ireland office, before becoming the General Secretary of Rotary International starting in 1995. He was a new head man. He set about to tell me in vile language he was the boss and I would be working under him. After a period of answering questions, I looked him in the eye and said, I really don't need your help. I will make every decision relating to the presidency of 1997-98 myself. If I need help, I have plenty of Rotary friends. And so began a very frosty relationship with the General Secretary. In that period of time, Will White, who was the editor of the Rotarian magazine, was a long-time friend of mine who wanted to talk to me about the Rotary International theme for 1997-98. I told Will the theme was going to be Build a Better World Through Better Communities. It was a collection of words I'd used in many speeches. He left quite happy. He returned to my office after the International Assembly, then held in February, to tell me there was an unwritten rule that consecutive themes should not have the same action word. I was in disbelief. Louis J.'s theme was Build the Future with Action and Vision. I spoke to two friends of mine, Bill Skelton and Mike Koussouras, both of whom advised me to break tradition. But Heather was very adamant that I should begin again, so I did. Heather and I both knew I had only 1 year in which to emphasise those things we believed important if Rotary International was serious about its long-term goal of world understanding and peace. We both held the view that Rotary International and its foundation needed to address some of the major impediments to world peace if it was serious about achieving its goal. In our hearts we knew poverty and hunger were an unwarranted condition for any human being. In our hearts we believed every child has the right to basic education as a stepping stone to a life of quality, fulfilment and prosperity. In our hearts we knew something had to be done about child abuse and child labour. In 1996 there were 186 million child slaves in the world. It was against that background the second theme, Show Rotary Cares for Your Community, for Our World and for Its People, was developed. It embraced our personal beliefs, concerns two events for one couple with limited financial resources to tackle. But with the help of 1.2 million Rotarians, we knew much could be achieved, and it was. The RI theme, Show Rotary Cares for Your Community, for Our World, for Its People, took a long time to develop. It came in parts. I always liked the words Rotary Cares, and they became the starting point. I needed an action word, and that became Show Rotary Cares. Then the question became, Show Rotary Cares, what for? The rest of the theme, for your community, for our world, for its people, were added over a period of about a month. And I must say now, as I stand here tonight at the end of my Rotary career, I'm glad I made the change. The emphases, poverty and hunger, literacy and numeracy, and the welfare of children did not take so long. When Heather and I talked about the emphases, she said to me, do you think the Rotary world is going to buy that? I replied that I didn't know, but I had only one chance to find out, and I was going to take the risk. The presidency is a 2.5-year assignment, so much to do. I had to develop the theme and the emphases, the presidential citation program, write speeches, attend board meetings, plus Rotary Institutes around the world, and I think I attended 11 of them, attend the budget planning meetings for the 97-98 year, attend the 97-98 Convention Planning Committee meetings being held in Indianapolis. No one else could do it. It was a lonely period for Heather and me and my secretary, Nancy Lindbergh. We got no help from the President's office that is supposed to support the President nominee, the President-elect, and the President. The manager of the President's office was out of sight and mind for more than 12 months. Fortunately, Nancy and I knew enough of staff members we could rely on to get the help and information we needed from time to time. There were many meetings with staff. During one of the planning meetings, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, asked how much money I wanted in the budget for speechwriters. I was absolutely dumbfounded. Absolutely dumbfounded. A previous president had spent $80,000 on external speechwriters. That's hard to believe. Any person who reaches the office of president and needs a speechwriter shouldn't be there. We spent $80,000 on speechwriters. Before going to the Secretariat, I selected 30 of my better speeches to take with me. They provided the basis for my official speeches and emphases. The things I emphasised when club president in 1965-66 were the emphases for 97-98. Nancy Lindbergh, my secretary, entered the 30 speeches into the President's office computer system, updating the facts and the figures. Before making my acceptance speech to the Calgary Convention, there was an electoral procedure that required Rotarians to second my nomination prior to the General Secretary casting the united ballot of the Calgary Convention for me to serve as the 97-98 President of Rotary International. 10 Rotarians seconded the motion. 3 of the 10 were 3 Rotarians from District 9600, past District Governor John Ferris, past District Governor Reg Payne, and past President of Rotary International 1978-79, Sir Glen. After the election process, I made my acceptance speech. Herb Brown, a friend of mine, was the incumbent president. During his major speech at the Calgary Convention, there was in his speech a story from one of my speeches about Edmund Hillary conquering Mount Everest. I never told Herb Brown. Returning to the Secretariat after the convention, I had another encounter with the General Secretary, asking him how a story from one of my speeches got into Herb Brown's speech. He came back to me saying the staff speechwriter had written it. I told him to compare the texts. No staff speechwriter can write the same story word for word exactly as I had written it. He came back to me again confessing that Janice Young, the staff speechwriter, had copied my speech. How did she get it? In the early days of the Secretariat, all staff had access to the computers in the President's office. I couldn't believe it. That changed late in the year I was President-elect, but it was too late. Unprofessional staff, big noting themselves, had leaked the theme, the emphases, the citation program, and the colour of the jacket that you see hanging here. I've lost my place now. To their friends, particularly in the United States, long before launch day at the 1997 International Assembly. Over the years, I had continuing problems with the staff honouring the speech text I submitted. The 2 worst cases were my major speeches at the Indianapolis Convention and the 2003 convention in Brisbane. All speeches are converted to United States English and spelling for publication. I had another encounter with the General Secretary about office cubicles that have been erected outside the offices on the 18th floor. The 18th floor of the Secretariat is a magnificent open space where the President's office is, the President-elect, Chairman of the Trustees, senior staff operate. The staff had made a management decision to shrink Rotary's occupancy at the Secretariat by a couple of floors to increase rental income. To get to the President-elect's office, I had to walk a right-angle passage 75 centimetres wide. I phoned the General Secretary to come to my office and told him if the cubicles were not removed, the President-elect's office would become the General Secretary's office. By that time, I had the upper hand. A subsequent board meeting, there was was held in those days, I think September or October, made their removal compulsory. Midway through the President-elect year, my friend, past President Bill Skelton, who I served as the Vice President, was in my office chatting. All of a sudden he stood up and said, "Glenn, I've got to go." I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I've got a meeting with the General Secretary." A little later he returned to my office, so I inquired what the meeting was about. To my disbelief, he told me the General Secretary wanted to know how to get on better terms with the President-elect. Bill Skelton told him he should have thought about that the first day I arrived in the office. The low-cost shelter initiative was without doubt the most significant initiative and project worldwide in 1997-98. During 1982-84, we visited African countries south of the Sahara on 3 occasions. In South Africa, we saw low-cost housing being built for about 7,000 rand, the equivalent then of about 3,000 Australian dollars. The government was repatriating blacks from urban areas to their homelands. The idea stayed with me. The Rotary Foundation had a no building policy, and to get matching grants funding from the Rotary Foundation for low-cost shelters would be very contentious, and it was. I approached the chairman of the trustees, Raja Sabu, a friend of mine, and outlined the proposition. Would this foundation support low-cost shelter scheme and bypass the regulation prohibiting the building projects? Raja took the concept to the trustee meeting and they turned the idea down. When Raja told me the trustee's decision, I told him my decision. I told Raja I was going to appeal to every Rotary Club in the world for funding to test the project. I was soon invited to the trustee meeting to be told they would support a 3-year pilot project to be evaluated in April 2000. The low-cost shelter program lasted until I finished serving as the chairman of trustees in 2003. As soon as I disappeared, so did the low-cost shelter program. Many people wonder how they get assigned to committees and all sorts of appointments. And I'm going to tell you what I did. The President-elect makes all committee appointments for the presidential year, and it has to have all committee assignments completed by the end of March for publication in the official directory. For many past governors, an appointment to serve on an RI committee or as the Rotary International President's representative to a district conference is their ultimate goal. Regrettably, very few get the chance. Although I'm not exactly sure now, I think there were 22 committees in 1997-98. Before choosing any Rotarian for an assignment, I wrote to the past presidents of Rotary, past directors, past district governors that I knew around the world and asked them to submit names of qualified people who might ably fill the criteria for membership of a particular committee and other appointments. My secretary, Nancy Lindbergh, collated and tabled the information. I then asked 8 Rotarians from various parts of the world to help make the committee's selections. I personally chose past Director Kalyan Banerjee to chair the Poverty and Hunger Committee. I chose past District Governor Dick Walker from District 9630 to chair the Literacy and Numeracy Committee. I also appointed Rotarian Marjorie Cars, a professor of mathematics at the Queensland University, to the committee. Dick Walker from District 9630 had developed what he called the Concentrated Learning Encounter program that he took to Thailand, where it was adopted as standing teaching practice in all Thai schools. For the first time, the 1997-98 Rotary International Board funded Dick Walker to the extent of $150,000 US to take the Concentrated Learning Encounter to developing countries. That was a great achievement. when it came to assigning past district governors and others to serve as President's representatives, I asked a close friend of mine, past Director Glen, to help. From a very long list of names representing the countries of the world, Glen made the choices to serve at conferences up to 3 months ahead. After he had made the choices, we sat together and reviewed the assignment. I made very few changes. There are 2 committees that are envied memberships, the Council on Legislation Committee and the Convention Committee. The Council on Legislation was being held in Delhi, India, between the 12th and 15th of January 1998. I was under immense pressure to appoint an American Rotarian who had already been the chairman of 3 councils on legislation. I said to these fellows, I'm not prepared to appoint the fellow the 4th time. What I would be saying to the Rotary world is nobody else in the Rotary world good enough to serve as the chairman of the council. I finally told the RI board that I would announce the names when I had made the choices. I telephoned Glen that night and talked to him and asked him whether he would accept the role to advise the Rotary International Board on council matters, and Glen said yes. So I finally announced the members I had chosen to facilitate the council. The chairman was an American, Ray Klingsmith, past director. The current president of Rotary International Britain and Ireland, Rodney Huggins, was the vice president chairman. Rotary International past director, Jack Forrest from Texas as a sergeant. Past President Clem was the advisor. And Rotary International treasurer Brian Knowles from the Gold Coast. It was the council parliamentarian. The chair of the council is regarded as a plum assignment. The council considered 283 proposed enactments and resolutions and adopted only 54 proposals. In attendance there were 513 voting delegates from 521 districts, a 98.4% representation. The council was the first ever to be held in India and was the first to include a woman delegate. India was on the verge of not hosting this Rotary Showcase event. In the lead up to the council, they had a budget of 2.2 million. The organising committee submitted that it could not possibly run the event for that figure and wanted 2.7 million. The previous council in Caracas, 3 years earlier, cost 1.7 million. I got numerous phone calls from my friend Kalyan Banerjee seeking more money. My reply was no more money. It got to the point that I called a meeting with senior staff asking them to explore Kuala Lumpur as an alternative site to Delhi. Within 15 minutes, listen to this, within 15 minutes of the meeting ending, I got a phone call from Kalyan Banerjee asking, Glen, what is going on? And I told Kalyan the budget was 2.2 million and there would be no more money. The Indians' revised budget of 2.2 million had a string attached to it that required the Rotary International Board to stay at the government-owned Ashok Hotel in Delhi. Who leaked the meeting to Kalyan Banerjee? I don't know. Got no idea. But it was typical response from the staff at that time that absolutely disgusted me. The staff was out of control at that point in time, the secretary. Then came the jacket. In 1984-85, when Carlos Canseco from Mexico was the president of Rotary International, he chose to introduce a sports coat jacket for his district governors to wear. He chose a very bright yellow colour. So began a tradition that has been followed by every successive Rotary International president. All my life, I have worn colours that have been all shades of blue and grey. and my choice of the jacket colour was going to be in the same band of colours. We were attending a Rotary Institute in New Jersey where there was a sea of blue and grey sports coats. Heather remarked that I should choose a more fashionable colour. Arrangements were made for us to visit the clothing factory in Georgia that manufactured the Rotary jackets that was owned by a Rotarian. When we arrived at his plant, he had on show 5 or 6 racks of jackets, the colours of the rainbow. I tried on many colours that might be suitable, but kept returning to one named seafoam green or teal. I settled for a colour that in my life I'd never worn. The manufacturer subsequently told me that seafoam green colour outsold every other jacket by more than 50%. I guess that no other jacket since has exceeded the number sold in 1997-98. The jackets hanging here, I wore the jacket constantly during 1997-98 and have not worn it publicly since. Each year, the Rotary International President receives an enormous number of gifts from clubs and districts when visiting them. I saw the gifts as a huge waste of money, gifts that I didn't need. I decided that I did not want any gifts, so I wrote to every 1997-98 district governor requesting no gifts and recommending the gift money be used for a project of Rotary. The district governor from Sri Lanka ended up giving $10,000 to the Rotary Foundation as a result. It didn't stop the gifts. My secretary told me that I received only a third of the gifts that other presidents had. The 1/3 I got was still far too many. Well, how do you determine the countries to visit? During the 1996-97 year, when I was serving as President-elect, Rotary International staff prepared for me a very large map of the world showing the travels of the previous 3 presidents, using different coloured headpins. The pattern was obvious. The east coast of the United States being the most visited, and around the world to mainly developing countries and to capital cities. We sought to change that because Rotary districts, wherever they are, they make Rotary International what it is. We included countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, Swaziland, Ivory Coast, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Venezuela, Ecuador, Bolivia, and the British Virgin Islands, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Those countries represent 12 of the 30 countries we visited during the presidential year. The Glasgow Convention was the starting point for the 1997-98 Rotary year. It was there that I delivered my major speech of the Rotary world. The convention was attended by 807 Australians, a record at that time, and maybe I think it still is. 8 of our club members and their partners attended. I was very honoured by that. And Hugh Springer and Carol were also there and later became members of this club. It was at the Glasgow Convention the first meeting of the Poverty and Hunger Committee took place. At that meeting, the Japanese member of the Poverty and Hunger Committee committed $1 million to the low-cost shelter program from clubs in Japan, and that money was received. So concludes the first half. first 1997-98 board meeting was held in a small town near Glasgow, after which we travelled to Brussels in Belgium to visit the Smith-Kline Glaxo plant that produced the polio vaccine for the polio immunisation program. It was a very interesting visit. I spent a lot of time there. I didn't understand much of it, but people who didn't want monkeys used for medical trials would have been very upset, and that was very interesting. That particular company has supplied all the vaccine for the polio campaign.
Sorry, Glen, I'm talking here at the back.
Hello, can you hear?
It's on their wave at you at the back there then.
Yeah. And so began a year of lunches and dinners, at which I wandered from table to table to speak to Rotarians. If I did not visit every table during the luncheon or dinner, I always stood at the door to say farewell to every Rotarian that attended the function. We visited the Ivory Coast, and when I look back I realise we took risks that could have turned sour. We could not get a visa to go to the Ivory Coast. The district governor, a black African, Alain Bambara, was desperate for us to visit his country because no Rotary International President had been there for 14 years. I kept refusing to go without a visa, and he kept assuring the staff at Rotary International that he would guarantee my safe passage in and out of his country. For some unknown reason, I agreed to go. We went and we survived. We were under constant police guard both inside and outside the hotel. In the hotel, 2 police occupied the room next to ours. They guarded our room day and night. We had police escorts wherever we went. From there we went to Ghana. We were in Ghana on my first official day in office on July 1, 1997. Ghana's a country where 50% of the children don't go to school. I was in Ghana to observe a major literacy project of the Rotary Club of Hamilton as part of its Ghana book project. Heather and I helped local Rotarians distribute thousands of books to teachers, mothers, fathers and children. The project started only a couple of years earlier in 1996. When we arrived on July 1, the project had already distributed 86,000 books to 270 schools and 58,000 students. Hopefully this emphasis in a country where 50% of the children don't go to school will help children climb the economic ladder. From there we went to South Africa. Rotarians in Johannesburg, South Africa, had also embarked on a significant literacy project. Heather and I attended the dedication of Literacy House in Johannesburg. The Johannesburg Club purchased Literacy House as a 75th anniversary project to give meaning to the elimination of illiteracy. The refurbished building, when completed and when funding was secured, was to serve as the headquarters of the National Literacy Cooperation, a group of 200 non-governmental organisations, as well as classrooms for adult literacy training and computer skills training. Literacy House, when operating at full strength, is a facility that provides hundreds of young people and adults the opportunity to obtain the literacy and computer skills required to fund meaningful work in the information age. I was told many years ago the project has now been completed. We visited Harare, Zimbabwe on the 2nd and 3rd of July 1997 to see Rotarians and their projects. We were told on arrival we would not be meeting President Robert Mugabe. Mugabe was opposed to Rotary because of racial comments made by a Rotarian at a Rotary meeting a long time ago. No president of Rotary International had seen Mugabe in living memory. On the morning we were to leave Zimbabwe, the district governor called me to tell me Robert Mugabe wanted to see me in the palace. We went. We were served the best English morning tea that we had anywhere in the world. In conversation with him, he said, "Mr. Kinross, tell me what you want me to know about Rotary." I did that. At the conclusion of our visit, he told me he would now allow his senior public servants to become Rotarian. 19 years on, there are no public servants in Rotary in Zimbabwe. Mugabe was a very quietly spoken man who showed no sign of arrogance or even being capable of the violence that has happened in his country. When I was the president nominee of Rotary, the telephone rang in our home one Sunday. The caller was a fellow named Tony Moyle from the Rotary Club of Loxton, telling me the Motorcycle Fellowship of Rotarians was organising a sand dragon across the Simpson Desert. He told me there would be 600 motorcyclists from around the world participating, and he wanted me to be there. I thought it was a hoax, so I told him put his plan in writing and sent it to me. He did, and I agreed to go. The Sand Dragon was organised to follow our official visit to Adelaide in August 1997. August 15 came and we travelled by light aircraft to Birdsville to meet 140 Rotarians, including wives and friends of motorcyclists from England, the Netherlands and Australia. In real terms, Tony Moyle had taken me for a ride. Instead of 600 motorcyclists, there were 20. I will never forget the plane ride from Adelaide to Birdsville. The plane took off, 4 or 5-seater. It flew like this, the tail never got up. And it landed at a farm, an orchard. And then we took off from the orchard, and it was a 3-hour or 4-hour flight, and there was no toilets on board. But anyway, yeah, there was only 20 turned up. I will forever be the only Rotary International President to attend a Rotary meeting in the Outback. I called the meeting at the time a unique international event at which a cheque was presented to the Royal Flying Doctor Service for the provision of a humidity crib. I don't know where the humidity crib was going. I described Loxton as the first club in the Rotary world to hold a meeting in a town of 100 people. Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the second poorest country in the world. We travelled to Ethiopia in November 1997 for the country's first polio immunisation day, followed by the presidential conference on Kick Polio Out of Africa that was held in the United Nations Conference Centre in Addis Ababa. The conference discussed the unremitting litany of African woes: poverty, inadequate or non-existent healthcare, drought, hunger, illiteracy and homelessness. And so it went on. And that's still the case in many countries in Africa. Our accommodation was at the Hilton Hotel. Our room was a suite with 4 or 5 bedrooms. I told the Rotary International staff I would not use the room to live in such luxury in the second poorest country of the world. There was no other room available. The Rotary International staff asked me if I would feel more comfortable if our aide John Carrick and his wife Jill also used the suite. And that happened. On our way to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa, Heather's bags went astray. And she was forced to cope for 3 days with the clothes she was wearing, augmented by a few personal items from Jill Carrick, who fortunately had a similar build. The interesting time came when Heather's luggage arrived at the airport. Heather and Jill were taken by car to the airport to collect the bags, but that wasn't easy. The military were all over the place, and at the airport there were armed soldiers everywhere. After lengthy discussions, Heather was allowed inside the building to collect her luggage, but Jill had to remain outside under guard. During the conference, Heather and I were invited for dinner at one of the embassies in Addis Ababa, and I think it was the embassy from the Netherlands, and I sat beside the ambassador's wife. The first course was salad, and the ambassador's wife noticed I wasn't eating. She remarked so. I told her I did not eat salad in case of illness. She told me, Mr. Kinross, there is no need to worry. The salad and vegetables were washed with detergent, and then wait for the punchline. Washed in detergent and then rinsed with methylated spirit. True story. In Addis Ababa, Heather and I ate nothing but pizza and drank only bottled water. Others got sick, and this is a very humorous part of being sick. Cliff Document got sick. He was the chairman of trustees. One night when Cliff and his wife, Mary Elena, were looking in the hotel bottle shop window, Cliff said to Mary Elena, "Go in and buy that bottle of red wine." Mary Elena said to Cliff, "You don't drink red wine, Cliff." And Cliff said, "I don't want the wine, I want the cork." The National Immunisation Day was a great success. 8.5 million children were immunised. It was on that day that I had an experience I will never forget. We were taken into the Ethiopian countryside outside Addis Ababa, where we met some of the most impoverished and poorest people we had ever seen. We sat on primitive stools immunising children. The children were dirty, poorly dressed, flies in their eyes, but we did it lovingly. Mary Elena, wife of trustee chairman Cliff, went back to the car because she couldn't cope with what she was seeing. When we finished immunising so many children then gathered around me, 5 of them holding each finger on one hand. Another little girl took the other hand and began to stroke the veins on the back of my hand, like this. There was an eerie feeling, shivers went up my spine. And you know, that girl had never seen, those children had never seen a white skin ever before in their life. There we saw women washing their clothes in the stream, thrashing them on the grassy banks and then spreading them out on the grass slopes to dry. They'd never seen a washing machine. The opening of the Kick Polio Out of Africa conference was attended by the Ethiopian President, Dr. Nagaso Gidada, dignitaries from other African countries, religious leaders, officers from the United Nations and UNICEF. There was a parade of children walking past on crutches and in wheelchairs and on sticks. All of us had tears in our eyes. And the children sang, "It is too late for us, Mr. President." That's not me, that's President Gidada. "It is too late for us, Mr. President. We are stricken, but it is not too late for our brothers and sisters. Please do something for them." Rotary did. 8.5 million children were immunised. It was a heart-wrenching scene to see the children and to hear them sing. Today, Ethiopia is polio-free. At the conference, President Gidada invited me to meet him in the Haile Selassie Palace. That's an old palace, beautiful building, which I did. He asked me whether Rotary could help Ethiopia build its infrastructure. They had no money. And of course, Rotary doesn't have such money to build infrastructure. Among the many speakers was Dr. Catherine Hamlin, co-founder with her husband Reg Hamlin of the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital. Dr. Hamlin spoke of the plight of unknown numbers of Ethiopian women, many of them in their early teens, who suffered a vaginal fistula during childbirth, incontinent and treated as social outcasts. these women faced a life of misery unless a simple surgical procedure was performed to repair the internal damage caused by prolonged labour. Dr. Hamlin called it a silent, hidden epidemic, representing a vast reservoir of human misery and suffering. Some of us visited Catherine Hamlin's fistula hospital, in which more than 18,000 surgical procedures had been performed. My lasting memory is the stench of urine. I had the privilege of having lunch at Catherine's home by the river. It was modest yet comfortable and pretty. If Catherine and her late husband Reg, both gynecologists at the Crown Street Women's Hospital in Sydney, had remained in Sydney, Australia, they would have been multi-millionaires. Reg Hamlin passed away in 1994 and is buried in Ethiopia. Ethiopia today is Catherine's home too. I had the great honour of presenting Catherine Hamlin with Rotary's World Understanding and Peace Award at the Rotary Convention in 1998, and some of my fellow club members will remember that. One final thought about Addis Ababa. It must have been in the United Nations building. I don't think it was the hotel, but we looked from a window over the displaced persons camp, seeing the rooftops of a city bereft of amenities and human dignity. I commented that no one should have to live like that, but they do. The visit to Ethiopia was a never-to-be-forgotten experience for all Rotarians. Raipur in India is the poorest city I have ever visited. Australian Rotarians raised sufficient money to build 575 low-cost shelters in Raipur. I visited Raipur before the council and legislation commenced. That day, when we were inspecting the building progress, a very large group of people gathered outside the boundaries of the complex. I thought it was going to be a demonstration, so I asked Kalyan Banerjee what they had gathered for. He told me the people have gathered to see you. I was taken to meet them, and an old lady speaking in Hindi and being an interpreter to me told me she was the poorest person in Raipur, pleading for me to go and see where she lived, pleading her case to get a shelter. The others were also there to plead their case for a shelter. I returned to Raipur after the buildings were completed and was taken by Kalyan Banerjee to visit with some of the lucky ones, those who had got a shelter. We visited with this particular lady and she got down on her knees and brushed the dust from my shoes. I asked Kalyan what that meant. He replied, she thinks you're God. Only God could give her a house. Only God could give her a house. We made an official visit to Taiwan that was relentless physically and mentally. The day started very early in the morning and finished late into the night. Our visit recognised Taiwan's contribution to the Rotary Foundation. 4 districts created 1,431 new Paul Harris Fellows in the first 6 months of 97-98. 307 new benefactors and 28 major donors. On our official visit to Taiwan, we attended a breakfast at which 1,200 new Paul Harris Fellows were present. They came to hear my commendation for their support of the Rotary Foundation. Prior to arriving in Taiwan, we were aware we had to recognise 28 major donors. By the time we arrived, the number had grown to 58, when those further donors realised they could shake hands with the President of Rotary. A different culture to the one we have in our country. The final dinner in Taiwan was held for Lady Rotarians. On our arrival at the function, Heather was asked to be the guest speaker instead of me. That was fine by me, but it sent panic shivers up Heather's spine. Heather made plenty of notes and in a short time did very well. we visited Ecuador. In the city of Guayaquil, Rotarians from several local clubs built the Maria Zambarino School, which serves several hundred girls and boys. When I visited the school, all the students gathered for an assembly in the courtyard, and they looked so happy. They were joyous kids. They were great kids. During the day, the Maria Zambarino School serves as an elementary school for school children. But in the afternoons and evenings, it serves adults. Some of the school's classrooms serve as meeting rooms for local women who have become self-sufficient entrepreneurs through their participation in the Rotary Club-sponsored program of micro-enterprise loans. The women meet for mutual support, to discuss the progress of their business activities and to seek the advice from their Rotarian partners, and to help who have embarked on a path to independence through small-scale credit programs. The Rotarians of Ecuador, and this couldn't happen in a country like Australia, the United States or Britain, couldn't happen. The Rotarians also focused on raising the level of education throughout the country. And it must have been Rotarian educators devised a strategy and drafted a master plan for national educational standards in Ecuador. The Ecuador adopted the plan for the whole country with a goal of full implementation in the year 2000. That couldn't happen here. The education department wouldn't even talk to us when it happened in Ecuador. I'm going to tell you about 3 people we met. We met so many people, so many interesting people. The President of Rotary meets many people during the presidential year. One of those we met was Queen Noor of Jordan, and she was a standout, really. She was beautiful. She was an American lady, one of the Kodak Eastman family, who married King Hussein. I was told Queen Noor was a Roman Catholic by birth, who embraced the Islam faith when she married King Hussein. At the time, King Hussein was in the United States receiving cancer treatment. Heather and I spent about 1 hour with the Queen. She was not only beautiful and charming, she was also engaging in conversation. I was told before I went she'd be asking you for money for her charities, but she didn't do that. In company with other service club leaders, I was invited to the White House to meet President Bill Clinton. He was seeking the support of service clubs to lift the educational standard of American children. The meeting at the White House was at a time of the Monica Lewinsky affair. And I can tell you, I've never met a cooler fellow in my life. He showed no signs of being uncomfortable, and I found him to be a very charming man. The third person, I met Norman Borlaug at the Rotary International Presidential Conference in Rio, where he was one of the speakers. Norman Ernest Borlaug was an American biologist who was awarded the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize in recognition of his contributions to world peace through increasing food production for food supply. He has been called the father of the Green Revolution and agriculture's greatest spokesperson. He had accepted an agricultural research position in Mexico, where he developed semi-dwarf, high-yield, disease-resistant wheat varieties that doubled the yields that enabled Mexico to become a wheat exporting country. Norman Borlaug was a fascinating person, very humble. His life was dedicated to improving agricultural output. He told a great story about feeding the world. Half the world starves, and he was telling us we can feed the world. I wish I could have spent more time with him. The Indianapolis Convention near the end of 97-98 was a showcase of what had happened during the year. Indianapolis wasn't the go-to city in the United States. Others were predicting a small convention. I promoted the convention everywhere I travelled. On the other hand, I had President-elect Jim Lacey, whose convention was being held in Singapore, telling me his convention would be huge. It would be an embarrassment. the numbers that were going to go to Singapore. That did not happen. 18,000 went to Singapore, 19,000 went to Indianapolis. The 1997-98 Rotary Board did all the right things. We arrived at the front door of the convention centre and walked into the plenary session with Rotarians. We visited the House of Friendship as an RI board and made ourselves available to any Rotarian who wanted to talk to us. An Indianapolis Rotarian built 2 low-cost shelters in the House of Friendship for me, free of charge. 8 couples from the Hamilton Club were there. I was honoured, and it was a fitting end to the 1997-98 Rotary year. The demands and expectations of the Rotary world were more than could be delivered by any human being. It seemed that whatever I did was never enough. The days were long and the nights were short. At the end, I was physically and mentally exhausted. Most presidents finish the same way. No one except the RI president knows what it is like. That wasn't the finish. There was another 4 years as a Rotary Foundation trustee, and in the 4th year serving as the chairman of trustees. And that's a story for another day. The RI Secretariat's only purpose is to make it easier for Rotarians to do the work of Rotary. Never forget it. It only exists to make it easier for you and I to do the work of Rotary. The real work of Rotary goes on every day in the cities, towns and villages of 220 countries, inhabited by 1.23 million Rotarians. Rotarians, don't forget this either, Rotarians are the unrecognised asset of Rotary. I must say that I found the work of Rotary all-consuming. I have never belonged to any other organisation that provides the opportunity to be part of projects and programs aimed at enhancing and improving the lot and the lives of people everywhere. Rotary International is a very large organisation that accomplishes much through its member club. As a secretariat, it accomplishes nothing. It's the member clubs and Rotarians in the world who do the work of Rotary. The world would be poorer without Rotary, and the world is a better place because of Rotary. It is a good organisation. It has enriched my life. To be chosen to serve as the 89th Rotary International President was a great honour. My Rotary membership has been a great journey. It has been an experience that money couldn't buy. I am still a proud member of my club, a club that gave me opportunity to do more. And I'm thankful to District 260 also providing me with opportunities to do more. I am thankful for Rotarians like Norman Wilson, a member of my club, and the late past District Governor Ben Bennett, who followed me as the District Governor of District 260 for pushing me from behind. I am grateful to Bruce Bork, friend for 51 years, who ensured I remained in Rotary after the unthinkable loss in 1998, and who cared for me beyond measure. I had finished with Rotary in 1998. I have appreciated the enduring 51-year friendship with Glen. Though unable to be here tonight, is here in spirit. Clem and Bruce know more about me than any other persons on earth. My friends inside and outside of Rotary are here tonight. You have honoured me with your presence. I hope to see you many more times. Thank you for being my friends. Good night.
One of the takeaways I took from that, Glen, was that I thought I heard you say the words, "That's a story for another day." Does that mean that this may not be your final address? Now, We've got just a few minutes for any questions. Glen said to waltz and all, ask any question you like. Would anybody like to just take a couple of questions? Anyone like to ask Glen a question?
Funniest
Yeah.
experiences. What was your funniest experience as RO president?
What's that?
What was your funniest experience? So maybe a quick funny anecdote of something that happened.
Funniest and I guess not funny but funny. And when I was the president, arrangements had been made for me to meet with Tim Fisher, who was then the deputy leader of the National Party or whatever. He was a Rotarian, and I went to meet Tim Fisher asking for money. And he said to me, Glen, I'll do my very best to get you all the money you want. And then later in the day, I bumped into John Howard in the passageway, and photographers were all over the place, and they took my photograph, and it's up on the board here. And that night, I had an appointment to meet with Alexander Downer, who was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Anyway, I was taken to his office, and he came out of the Parliament, and he sat on a chair there, and I sat on a chair here, and there was an occasional table in between us. The first thing he did was put two big feet up on the table. Now, he was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. An ugly scene, but in hindsight, a humorous scene. Put his feet up like this, and all I saw was two big feet. Anyway, I said to him, Mr. Downer, we're trying to eradicate polio and we need money. And he said, well, it'll have to come from AusAid, just like that. It'll have to come from AusAid. And then he said to me, where would it be used? And I said, well, Africa's in great need at this particular point in time. There'll be no money for Africa, just like that. Wiped out. No money for Africa. And anyway, the meeting wound up and we got no money at all from Alexander Downer or the government. What's the funniest thing? There were many funny things that happened. I'm not quite sure that I can recall them. But the Alexander Downer affair was an eye-opener to me. I think a Minister of the Crown could put his feet up in my face on the table.
I know I certainly wouldn't be putting my feet up in your face, Glen, so does anybody else have any questions? One more?
There at the back.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I'd just like to ask you, Glen, what actually brought you to Rotary? What inspired you to join?
Very good question. Thank you very much.
Why did you
join
Rotary?
What inspired you to join Rotary?
Oh,
In a couple of quick words.
you know, I was a furniture manufacturer trying to make a living at the time, trying to grow a business. And my doctor was a fellow, Hugh Ward Anderson, who practiced in Clayfield. And he was the family doctor. And I used to go to him and he delivered 3 of our children. And eventually I got a phone call from Hugh Anderson. And he said to me, Glen, a fellow you don't know, John Riddell, and I would like to come and visit you in your home. In those days, you were invited to join Rotary by personal invitation in your home. So these 2 fellows came, and they told me a bit about Rotary, what it was all about. And I really didn't know what it was about at the time. But I decided I'd join because I thought, if Hugh Anderson belongs to that club, it must be a good club. And so I joined. And that's how I became involved in Rotary.
Let's go one more.
Yeah, Glen, I say this with great respect and great appreciation for what you're telling us about your experience, and of course you haven't told us everything, but you've told us a lot, warts and all, about how a Rotarian leader asserts himself in a context where you're the leader and they're meant to be the followers. When you left what I call the public service of Rotary, do you think you'd led them into shape, or at least got them in the right direction?
Yeah, there were huge changes took place. Huge changes took place, and I had those encounters with the General Secretary, and he didn't last long. I didn't know that Louis J., the President, was having problems with him, that he got the sack. And the manager of the President's office got the sack. They were moved on. There were big changes took place, and by the time I finished in the end of 1998, the Secretariat couldn't be recognised to the one that I went to in 1996. Yeah, huge change. Huge change.
Thanks, Christopher.
Let me tell you this. When I went there, that's not in my speech, but Heather and I lived at a hotel called the Omni Orrington for 6 months. And the days that Heather didn't come to the office with me, I used to go back to the hotel for lunch or for morning tea to give her a bit of company. And at morning tea time and afternoon tea time, there were more staff out in the streets of Evanston doing their shopping than there were in the building. There were.
Thanks for that, Christopher, and I thank you very much also as District Government nominee for 9630 for coming tonight. I'm sorry that I missed you before. I'm going to give the final word to someone I think is quite appropriate, to your daughter. I think she'd like to either say something or ask something.
Dad, I've got a good question for you. You're a dapper dresser. You're a dapper dresser. Dapper.
Dapper dresser?
Yeah. Where do you get your suits made?
Time to sit down.
You're going to answer that?
We probably should wrap it up there, but before I do wrap up, I just wanted to mention something that was brought up by our District Governor, Alan Stevens, who's not here tonight, during his DG visit just last week. He said that with all the great Rotary projects, I don't know his words he's made up or he's got them somewhere else, but he said that great Rotary projects effectively come about because of one person's idea. And I know we've talked about it quite a bit tonight, but I think amongst all the great things in your Rotary life, Glen, low-cost shelters is a project that can't be praised enough. There's so many people around the world, as Sir Clem said in his apology letter earlier, who owe a roof over their heads thanks to that one idea. And both, yourself and Heather, the time and effort you put into that, and the project continues on today. Now, normally at the end of a Rotary speech, a speaker's presented with a gift or memorabilia, maybe a pen with the past International President's signature on it, which we spent all last year giving away to guest speakers. But I do know that you've spent the last 20 years trying to give things away as opposed to receiving them. So I think it's just more fitting for us again to probably stand, please, and give you one final round of applause for entertaining us tonight, and to thank you for everything you've contributed to your club, to your district, to the community and to the world. And as president of this club, I'm very proud to say that I'm in the same club as Glen Kinross. So, ladies and gentlemen, for one last time, I present to you past Rotary International President, amongst other things, Glen Kinross. Thanks all for coming tonight. I wish we could have this sort of calibre of speakers every week and get this sort of attendance every week. Well, we do actually get this attendance every week from people that it's a club. I will probably see some of you next week at the Centenary Foundation Centenary Dinner at Eagles Hill, so I look forward to seeing some of you then. And thanks very much for coming, and drive safe. Good night. Thank you.